The dust of the prairie road swirled around Lillian Crawford as she collapsed, her thin frame no match for the merciless Nebraska summer of 1879. 3 days without food and only muddy water to drink had finally taken their toll. The 16-mile walk from the stagecoach station had been a desperate gamble after the last of her money had been stolen in Omaha. Now, as consciousness slipped away, she wondered if her journey west would end here, another nameless grave along the frontier. Miss, can you hear me?" The voice seemed to come from miles away, deep and concerned. Lillian felt strong arms lifting her, cradling her against a solid chest that smelled of leather, horses, and pine soap. "Stay with me now, you're safe." Her eyelids fluttered, revealing the weathered face of a man silhouetted against the harsh sun. His features were sharp but kind, worry etched in the lines around his eyes. "Water," she managed to whisper, her voice a dry rasp. "Here," he said, bringing a canteen to her cracked lips. "Small sips only. You're too weak to take much." The water was cool and sweet, like nothing she'd ever tasted. As her vision cleared, Lillian saw she was being held by a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I might die out here." The man's expression grew grave. "You very nearly did, miss. I've seen stronger men than you felled by this land." He studied her gaunt face and the way her dress hung loosely on her frame. "You're too thin to survive out here alone. The prairie isn't kind to the unprepared." Shame burned in Lillian's chest. After her parents' deaths from influenza last winter, the bank had taken their modest Pennsylvania farm. With nowhere else to go, she'd answered an advertisement for a schoolteacher in the frontier town of Pine Creek. The journey had depleted her small inheritance faster than she'd anticipated, and then the theft in Omaha had left her with nothing. "I have somewhere to be," she insisted, trying to stand but finding her legs uncooperative. "The only place you're going is back to my ranch," he said firmly, lifting her onto his horse as if she weighed nothing at all. "I'm Lucas Vance, by the way. I run the Double V about 5 miles east of here." "Lillian Crawford," she replied, grateful for the sturdy arm he kept around her waist as he mounted behind her. "I'm to be the new schoolteacher in Pine Creek." Lucas clicked his tongue, urging his horse forward. "Pine Creek, that's still 15 miles from here." "You wouldn't have made it another 5 in your condition." His voice softened. "Don't worry, Miss Crawford. I'll put strength back in you before you take on a classroom full of wild frontier children." The gentle rocking motion of the horse lulled Lillian into a drowsy state as they traveled. She noticed how carefully Lucas held her, ensuring she wouldn't fall. Despite her predicament, she felt oddly safe with this stranger. "How did you find me?" she asked. "I was checking fence lines along the eastern boundary, lucky thing too." He adjusted his hat with his free hand. "Not many folks travel this road. Might have been days before anyone else came along." The implication of those words sent a chill down Lillian's spine. Death had been much closer than she'd realized. The Double V Ranch appeared on the horizon after an hour's ride, a modest but well-maintained homestead with a 2-story main house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. A small creek ran nearby, bordered by cottonwood trees that provided rare shade in the open landscape. "It's not much," Lucas said as they approached, "but it's home." "It's beautiful," Lillian replied honestly. After days of endless travel and uncertainty, the ranch looked like paradise. As they neared the house, a woman in her 50s hurried onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled into a practical bun, and her face showed immediate concern when she saw Lillian. "Lucas, what's happened?" "Found her collapsed on the East Road, Mrs. Hoffman," Lucas explained as he carefully dismounted, then reached up to help Lillian down. "She needs food, rest, and some of your special care." "You poor thing," Mrs. Hoffman said, taking Lillian's arm. "I'm Edith Hoffman, the housekeeper. Come inside before you fall over again." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture and colorful quilts that softened the rugged frontier aesthetic. Mrs. Hoffman settled Lillian at the kitchen table while Lucas fetched fresh water from the pump. "You drink this broth first," Mrs. Hoffman insisted, placing a mug in front of Lillian. "Your stomach won't handle much else right now, then we'll get you bathed and into a proper bed." Lillian sipped the warm chicken broth gratefully. "I don't want to be a burden. Once I've rested, I need to continue to Pine Creek. They're expecting me." Lucas leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest. "Pine Creek isn't going anywhere, and they can wait a few days for their schoolteacher. Right now, you couldn't teach a cat to nap." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You need at least a week of good food and rest before you're fit to travel again." "A week," Lillian protested. "But the school term will still be there," Lucas finished. "I'll send word to town tomorrow that you've arrived safely but need time to recover." Samuel Miller runs the general store in Pine Creek. He's on the school board and a reasonable man. Lillian wanted to argue but found she lacked the strength. The simple act of drinking broth had exhausted her. Seeing her fatigue, Mrs. Hoffman helped her to a small bedroom off the main hallway. "This was Lucas's mother's room," she explained, turning down the quilt on a comfortable-looking bed. "She passed 5 years ago. You rest now, and I'll bring you some more broth later." After a tepid bath that left her feeling human again and dressed in a borrowed nightgown that hung loosely on her frame, Lillian sank into the bed. Despite her intention to only rest briefly, she fell into a deep sleep that lasted through the night and well into the next morning. When she finally awoke, sunlight was streaming through the curtains. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up, feeling stronger but still shaky. A soft knock preceded Mrs. Hoffman's entrance with a tray. "Good morning, dear. I've brought you some eggs and toast. Nothing too heavy, but you need to start rebuilding your strength." Lillian ate slowly, savoring each bite of the simple but delicious food. "Where is Mr. Vance, Lucas? He's been up since before dawn, checking on a new calf." "That man never stops working." Mrs. Hoffman's tone was affectionate. "He built this place from nothing after his father died, just 20 years old and suddenly responsible for the whole ranch and his mother." "He lives here alone now?" Lillian asked, curious about her rescuer. "Just him and the hands, 3 men who help with the cattle, and me, coming in daily to cook and keep house." Mrs. Hoffman smiled. "I've been telling him for years he needs a wife, but he's too busy building his herd to court properly." Lillian blushed at the implication. "I'm sure he'll find someone suitable when he's ready." Mrs. Hoffman gave her a knowing look that only deepened Lillian's discomfort. "Rest today. Tomorrow, if you're feeling stronger, you can sit on the porch for some fresh air." The next few days established a rhythm. Lillian would eat the nutritious meals Mrs. Hoffman prepared, rest, and gradually spend more time out of bed. By the 4th day, she felt strong enough to sit on the front porch, wrapped in a quilt despite the summer warmth. Lucas found her there in the late afternoon, watching the endless prairie stretching to the horizon. He looked tired but satisfied after a day's work, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. "You're looking better," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Some color in your cheeks now." "Thanks to you and Mrs. Hoffman," Lillian replied. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Lucas waved away her gratitude. "No debt between neighbors out here. We all help each other survive." He studied her face. "Mrs. Hoffman says you've been eating well." "The food is wonderful. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd had a proper meal." "It shows. You were nothing but bones when I found you." His directness might have offended her once, but Lillian had quickly learned that frontier people had little use for delicate sensibilities. "May I ask what brought you all the way from Pennsylvania to teach in a place you've never seen?" Lillian sighed, gazing out at the land that had nearly claimed her life. "Necessity. After my parents died, there was nothing left for me in Harrisburg. I saw the advertisement for a teacher and I thought it would be a fresh start. And the journey, more difficult than I anticipated." She explained about the theft in Omaha that had left her without funds for the final leg to Pine Creek. Lucas's jaw tightened. You walked 16 miles from the stagecoach station. I had no choice. The driver wouldn't extend credit, and I couldn't stay there with no money. You're either very brave or very foolish, Lucas said, but his tone held admiration rather than censure. Perhaps both, Lillian admitted with a small smile. I'm discovering I know very little about survival out here. That can be remedied, Lucas said thoughtfully, if you're willing to learn. Over the next few days, as Lillian's strength returned, Lucas began teaching her about life on the frontier. He showed her how to identify edible plants, how to gauge weather changes from the behavior of animals, and the importance of water conservation. The land provides if you know how to read it, he explained as they walked slowly around the ranch yard, Lillian leaning on his arm when her strength faltered. Most newcomers die because they fight the prairie instead of learning from it. Lillian was a quick study, her natural intelligence making up for her lack of practical experience. She began helping Mrs. Hoffman in the kitchen, learning to cook frontier-style and preserve foods for the harsh winters. In the evenings, Lucas would join them for dinner, and afterward they would sit on the porch watching the spectacular sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. These quiet moments became precious to Lillian, a time when Lucas would tell stories of growing up on the ranch or listen attentively to her recollections of her former life. Did you ever think of leaving? She asked him one evening, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival. Going east to the cities. Lucas considered the question seriously. Once, when I was about 16, thought there must be more to life than cattle and endless prairie. He gestured to the vast landscape before them. But this land gets in your blood, the freedom of it, the challenge. Cities feel like cages to me now. Lillian understood. Despite its dangers, there was something intoxicating about the open space and the self-reliance it demanded. She was stronger now, both physically and mentally, than she'd ever been in Pennsylvania. You'll do well in Pine Creek, Lucas said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. You've got grit under all those fancy Eastern manners. I'm hardly fancy, Lillian laughed, looking down at the practical calico dress Mrs. Hoffman had altered for her. Her once soft hands now showed calluses from helping with chores. Fancy enough, Lucas replied with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. But you're learning. The following day, Lucas announced he needed to ride into Pine Creek for supplies and would inform the school board of Lillian's impending arrival. You should be ready to take up your position next week, he said over breakfast, not quite meeting her eyes. Lillian felt an unexpected pang at his words. The thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Lucas, was surprisingly painful. In just 2 weeks, she had grown accustomed to his steady presence, his quiet strength, and their evening conversations. Yes, I suppose I should, she agreed. Her enthusiasm for her teaching position somehow diminished. Lucas returned late that evening, bringing news that the school term would begin the following Monday, giving Lillian 3 more days at the Double V. He also brought a letter that had been waiting for her at the general store. It's from the school board, Lillian said, breaking the seal. Her eyes widened as she read. Oh, they've arranged a boarding situation with the widow Jensen. Apparently she has a room to let in exchange for help with her children. Margaret Jensen is good people, Lucas nodded. Her husband was killed in a mining accident last year. She has 3 young ones. Lillian continued reading, her expression growing troubled. The salary is less than advertised, she bit her lip. Much less. That happens out here, Lucas said grimly. Towns struggle to keep their promises when times get hard. Lillian carefully folded the letter, her mind racing. The reduced salary would barely cover necessities, leaving nothing to save for emergencies or a return east if things didn't work out. And after her recent experience, she was acutely aware of how quickly fortunes could change. I'll manage, she said with more confidence than she felt. I've come too far to turn back now. Lucas watched her with an unreadable expression. "There's always another option," he said finally. "What's that? You could stay here." The words seemed to surprise him as much as her. "The ranch needs help, and not just with cooking and cleaning." "I've seen how quick you learn. You could keep the books, help with correspondence. Most ranchers' wives do that and more." Lillian's heart skipped a beat. "Wives?" Lucas's sun-bronzed face darkened with a blush. "I didn't mean, that is." He took a deep breath. "What I'm trying to say, Miss Crawford, is that I find myself admiring you greatly. Your courage, your determination. I know we've only known each other a short while, but out here, people often make quick decisions about important matters." "Mr. Vance," Lillian began, unsure how to respond. "Lucas," he corrected gently, "and I'm not proposing marriage, not yet, that would be presumptuous." He cleared his throat. "But I am offering you a position here with fair compensation while we get to know each other better." The proposition was unconventional, but then everything about this frontier was different from the life she'd known. And the thought of seeing Lucas daily, of continuing their conversations and perhaps exploring the growing warmth between them, was undeniably appealing. What would people say? She asked, practical concerns intruding. Mrs. Hoffman would stay on as chaperone, Lucas assured her. Your reputation would be preserved, and if after a time we find we suit each other. He left the thought unfinished, but his meaning was clear. Lillian thought of the tiny schoolhouse in Pine Creek, the reduced salary, the unknown widow and her children. Then she looked at Lucas, solid, dependable, and increasingly dear to her. "I would need to inform the school board," she said slowly. "They'll need time to find another teacher." Lucas's face broke into a rare, full smile that transformed his features. "Is that a yes?" "It's a I would like to try," Lillian clarified, but she was smiling too. "I've learned the hard way not to commit without knowing what I'm facing." "Fair enough," Lucas laughed, "and wise." The next morning, Lucas rode back to Pine Creek with Lillian's letter to the school board, explaining her decision to take a position at the Double V Ranch instead. He returned with their disappointed but understanding response, along with Lillian's trunk, which had been sent ahead weeks earlier. "They found a replacement already," he reported. "The blacksmith sister arrived from Kansas last month. Apparently she taught school there for years." Relief washed over Lillian. "I'm glad they won't be without a teacher." Life quickly settled into a new routine. Lillian took over the ranch's accounts, discovering a talent for organization and financial planning that impressed Lucas. She wrote letters to cattle buyers, negotiating better prices than the ranch had previously received. In the evenings, she continued her frontier education, now including riding lessons that left her sore but exhilarated. As summer faded into fall, the prairie turned golden and the days grew shorter. Lillian's body filled out, her once gaunt frame now healthy and strong. Her skin tanned from working in the garden, and her hands grew capable with tasks she'd never imagined performing. Lucas watched her transformation with undisguised admiration. Their evening conversations on the porch continued, growing deeper and more personal as trust built between them. He told her about the lonely years after his mother's death, the struggle to maintain the ranch through drought and harsh winters. She shared stories of her parents, her childhood dreams, and her fears for the future. The first time he kissed her was during the harvest moon in late September. They had ridden to a bluff overlooking the creek, watching as the huge orange moon rose over the prairie. "I've never seen anything so beautiful," Lillian breathed, the moonlight gilding her features. "I have," Lucas replied, his eyes fixed on her face. When he leaned toward her, she met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that started gently but quickly deepened with weeks of restrained longing. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as her hands found their way to his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Lillian Crawford," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "I believe I've already fallen," she replied, surprised by her own boldness but unwilling to deny the truth any longer. Their courtship progressed swiftly after that night. By early November, with the first snowfall threatening, Lucas formally proposed on bended knee beside the fireplace in the ranch house's main room. "I never expected to find you," he said, holding out a simple gold band. "A half-starved Eastern woman collapsed on my land. But now I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me, Lillian? Be my wife, my partner in everything?" Tears blurred Lillian's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas Vance." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in Pine Creek's small church. The entire town turned out, curious about the Eastern schoolteacher who had chosen ranch life over education. Mrs. Hoffman beamed proudly from the front pew as Lucas and Lillian exchanged vows, their voices steady and sure. Margaret Jensen, the widow who would have been Lillian's landlady, approached her at the reception. "I admit I was disappointed when you declined the teaching position," she said, "but seeing you with Lucas, I understand. Some matches are just meant to be." The winter of 1879–1880 was harsh, with blizzards that isolated the Double V for weeks at a time. But inside the ranch house, Lillian and Lucas built a warm haven. They spent long evenings reading aloud by lamplight, planning spring plantings, and sharing the deep intimacy of newlyweds discovering each other. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucas asked one night as they lay entwined beneath thick quilts, the wind howling outside. "Not teaching in Pine Creek." Taking a chance on a rough cowboy instead, Lillian propped herself up on one elbow, studying his beloved face in the dim light. "Never," she said honestly. "Teaching was just a means to an end survival, but this, us, the ranch, this is living." She pressed a kiss to his lips. "Besides, who says I'm not teaching? I've taught you to appreciate Shakespeare, haven't I?" Lucas laughed, pulling her closer. "That you have, and I've taught you to rope a calf and mend fences." "A fair exchange," Lillian smiled, "although I'm still better at bookkeeping than you'll ever be." "True enough," he agreed good-naturedly. "The ranch has prospered more in these few months with you than in the year before. You've got a head for business, Mrs. Vance." The name still gave Lillian a thrill. "We make a good team," she said softly. Spring came late but gloriously to the prairie. As the land renewed itself, Lillian discovered she was carrying new life as well. When she told Lucas, his joy was boundless. He lifted her in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while Mrs. Hoffman clapped her hands in delight. "A child," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "Our child." Throughout the summer, as Lillian's body changed to accommodate their growing baby, Lucas became even more protective. He insisted she rest during the hottest part of the day and brought her wild strawberries from a hidden patch near the creek. The ranch hands, initially skeptical of the Eastern woman, now treated her with a reverence that amused her. "I'm with child not made of glass," she protested when everyone fussed over her. "Humor us," Lucas replied, kissing her forehead. "It's not every day the Double V prepares for its heir." Their daughter, Emma Grace Vance, arrived on a crisp October morning in 1880, almost exactly a year after Lucas had found Lillian collapsed on the prairie road. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with Mrs. Hoffman and the doctor from Pine Creek attending. When Lucas first held his daughter, tears streamed unashamedly down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered, carefully returning the swaddled infant to Lillian's arms, "just like her mother." Lillian looked down at their child, then up at the man who had saved her life, given her a home and now a family. "I was thinking about the day we met," she said. "You said I was too thin to survive out here." "And I was right," Lucas replied, sitting beside her on the bed. "But I also said I'd put strength back in you." He smiled, touching their daughter's tiny hand with one gentle finger. "Looks like I kept my promise." "You did more than that," Lillian said softly. "You showed me how to thrive, not just survive." She leaned against him, their daughter nestled between them. "Who would have thought that collapsing on a dusty road would lead to all this happiness?" Lucas pressed a kiss to her temple. "The prairie works in mysterious ways, brings hardship and blessing in equal measure." His arm tightened around her shoulders. "But finding you was the greatest blessing of all." As winter returned to the Nebraska prairie, the Double V Ranch stood strong against the elements. Inside the sturdy ranch house, the Vance family created their own warmth, a love born of rescue, nurtured through hardship. And now flourishing in the harsh but beautiful frontier they both called home. Years later, when Emma asked how her parents met, they would tell the story honestly of a desperate woman too thin to survive and the cowboy who promised to put strength back in her. But they always ended with the same truth, that in saving each other, they had found everything neither knew they were looking for.